They're moving right now. Not tomorrow, not next month, right now. Major players in global finance have flipped the switch on XRP, and the on-chain data is lighting up like never before. While most people are still scrolling past the noise, the quiet machinery of trillion-dollar settlements just went live. But here's what should freeze you in place. This isn't another hype cycle or vague partnership announcement. This is the moment the system they built in the shadows starts operating in plain sight, and the first signals just broke through. What if everything you thought you knew about XRP was only the opening chapter? For years, skeptics called it dead. Banks ignored it. Regulators tied it down. Yet today, the same institutions that once dismissed it are quietly routing real value through the XRP ledger at speeds the old system could never touch. The volume isn't whispering anymore. It's screaming. Large wallets tied to known custodians just executed transfers that point directly at live operational use. Not testing, not pilots, actual movement. And this is only the visible layer. What are they preparing for that the public still hasn't been told? The timing is surgical. Global liquidity pressures are peaking. Traditional cross-border rails are cracking under inflation, regulation, and sheer inefficiency. And in the middle of this perfect storm, XRP is stepping forward as the bridge asset designed exactly for this environment. You're watching the transition happen in real time. Most retail investors are still waiting for a headline from CNBC. Meanwhile, the smart money has already positioned. The infrastructure has been stress-tested for years in the background. Now the live phase is unfolding. But here's the part that should make your pulse quicken. This movement isn't random, it's coordinated. And the implications stretch far beyond price action. They reach into how money will move across continents in the coming decade. If you think XRP was just another crypto, you're about to witness why it was built differently from day one. The weapon they built in the shadows. But here's what almost no one connects yet. XRP wasn't launched as another speculative token-chasing hype. It was engineered from the ground up as the exact solution the global financial system desperately needed but refused to admit it did. In 2012, a small team at Ripple looked at a broken world where moving money across borders took days, cost a fortune, and still failed too often. They didn't build another blockchain for memes or decentralized apps. They built a purpose-built ledger that could settle value in 3 to 5 seconds at fractions of a penny. That decision changed everything behind closed doors. While Bitcoin was still fighting for legitimacy and Ethereum chased smart contracts, XRP focused on one ruthless mission: become the neutral bridge asset that banks and payment providers could actually use at scale. No mining, no energy waste, just pure engineered efficiency. The years that followed looked like setbacks to outsiders. Regulatory storms hit hard, lawsuits dragged on. Headlines painted it as finished more than once. Yet every battle quietly strengthened the foundation. The 2023 court ruling that XRP itself is not a security for retail sales cleared the path most people still don't fully grasp. And while the noise raged, the real work continued in silence. Partnerships were signed. Infrastructure was stress-tested across continents. On-demand liquidity went from pilot to proven, in corridors that move billions daily. The ledger itself evolved with upgrades that made it faster, more compliant, and ready for institutional volume most coins could never handle. Now fast forward to right now in 2026. The same ledger that survived every attack is suddenly handling live operational flows from names you recognize. The weapon they built in the shadows isn't experimental anymore. It's armed and active. But the most dangerous part isn't the technology alone. It's the precise moment they chose to pull the trigger. The names you weren't supposed to see. But here's the twist almost no one is talking about yet. The names quietly stepping into the XRP ledger aren't small players testing the waters. They're the heavyweights who once stayed silent. Goldman Sachs just disclosed a $153.8 million position in spot XRP ETFs through its latest filing. That single move makes it the largest known institutional holder in the United States, out of roughly $211 million held by the top 30 institutions combined. What does it mean when the same Wall Street giant that once kept crypto at arm's length now owns the largest slice? The list keeps growing in the shadows. SBI Holdings in Japan has been running full on-demand liquidity corridors for years, settling real cross-border value with XRP at scale. Santander, PNC Bank, and Zan Bank in the UAE have moved from pilots to live operations. Even Rakuten is integrating the ledger directly into its core financial rails. These aren't press releases. These are on-chain movements and production deployments happening while the rest of the market scrolls past, and the numbers are starting to match the names. Daily transactions on the XRP ledger just hit 3 million in March 2026, a threefold jump from mid-2025 averages. That surge isn't retail speculation. It's driven by AMM pools, tokenized real-world assets now approaching $1.5 billion in represented value, and stablecoin settlement flows using RLUSD. Why would these institutions suddenly accelerate exactly when global liquidity pressures are peaking? The quiet infrastructure layer tells the real story. Over 300 financial institutions are now connected through RippleNet. Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered, and HSBC are actively linked in the new Swift Ripple framework scheduled to go fully live in the second half of this year. The DTCC itself has signaled tokenization production readiness for the second half of 2026, processing quadrillions in securities. The bridge they built is no longer theoretical, it's operational. But the part that should make every skeptic pause is this. While headlines still debate whether XRP is ready, the largest holders and the biggest payment rails are already moving real capital across it. The names you weren't supposed to see have been positioning for months. What happens when the public finally catches up to what they've already done? The domino effect that's already started. But here's where the real shift begins to hit everyone. The movements we just uncovered aren't isolated experiments. They're the first dominoes in a chain reaction that's already toppling old financial rails worldwide. When a single cross-border payment settles in under 5 seconds instead of 5 days, entire business models start to crack. Corporations that once lost millions in trapped liquidity during transfers can now free up capital instantly, redirecting it into growth instead of waiting in limbo. The savings aren't theoretical anymore. Remittance corridors using XRP have already slashed costs by up to 70% in live pilots, putting billions back into the pockets of families and small businesses that used to bleed out on fees. That money doesn't vanish, it circulates faster, creating ripple demand across local economies. Yet not everyone is cheering. Traditional banks watching their slow, high-margin settlement business erode have pushed back hard, calling the technology unproven at true global scale. But the data from active corridors tells a different story. Those same banks are now quietly joining the network rather than fighting it. The pressure is building on every front. Liquidity pools on the XRP ledger are deepening by the week, making larger and larger transfers possible without slippage. Tokenized real-world assets sitting on the ledger have crossed the billion-dollar mark, turning illiquid property and bonds into instantly tradable instruments that settle across borders in real time. What happens when trillions in traditional finance suddenly discover they can move at the speed of light? The global payment rails are feeling it first, but the next layer is even more explosive. Central banks exploring CBDC interoperability are turning to XRP as the neutral bridge because it already works, already complies, and already scales. The domino that falls next could rewrite how entire nations exchange value. And the part that should keep you watching is this. We're not talking about some future promise. The first major waves of this domino effect are already rolling through production systems right now. The hidden risks they don't want you talking about. But here's the side of the story the cheerleaders never mention. Even as the dominoes fall, real dangers are staring straight at anyone who steps into this shift without eyes wide open. The same speed that makes XRP powerful also makes it merciless when markets turn. Volatility hasn't vanished just because institutions showed up. One headline, one regulatory whisper, and the ledger can still swing double digits in hours. That reality hits harder than most want to admit. Competition is sharpening its knives too. Swift isn't standing still. Their new instant payment rails and tokenized experiments are racing to catch up, and some central banks are quietly building their own bridges that don't need XRP at all. If those systems prove cheaper or more politically palatable, the advantage XRP built in the shadows could narrow overnight. The pushback isn't just technical. Regulatory uncertainty still lingers in key jurisdictions. While the U.S. path cleared, other major economies could impose fresh restrictions or capital controls that slow adoption exactly when momentum feels unstoppable. And tokenized assets on the ledger, though growing, remain tiny compared to the quadrillion still locked in traditional systems. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're documented friction points playing out in real time. Yet here's what the critics miss when they focus only on the risks. The very institutions voicing those doubts are the same ones quietly increasing their exposure. They see the flaws and still choose to move because the alternative, the old rails, is already failing under its own weight. The question isn't whether dangers exist, it's whether you've positioned yourself to survive them when the next wave hits. Because this isn't just about price or technology anymore. It's about what happens to your own financial reality if you stay on the sidelines while the system rewires itself around you. Shall I continue to the next part? 6. Sexpert continue message limit reached upgrade to Super Grok, heavy for higher limits, or wait 2 minutes.